And for how long did you consider before you made the decision to enter this contest?
Well, I considered it for a couple of months, really, in some detail. Rick Williams and others had spoken with me about the possibility of running, and some of that was because I was very active in the home rule ratification adoption process and participated in and sponsored a couple of forums, one at Misericordia and one at Penn State, and also helped set up one at LCCC. And I found that process invigorating and very worthwhile, and I certainly was very pleased at the result that came out in the vote. After that, there were some people who sort of implied, when I talked about how great it was to have home rule, they said, well, maybe you need to put your money where your mouth is, and that's partly a literal aspect of running, and run for county council. And initially I was hesitant. I had no real party links, and this isn't particularly for attribution, but I was registered Republican up until the time I decided to run, and then had to change registration to independent. The elections people insisted on that. But I had not necessarily vigorously supported all Republican candidates, either in the county and particularly beyond the county. So I was, one of the real reasons that convinced me that I should run and should run as an independent is that there is, in my mind, a terrible danger that while we have created a whole new system of county government, we may end up with many of the same people who have been associated with county government in this new system. And I feel that it is going to be very difficult for some of them to make an adjustment to a new system, and a dreadful tendency to go back to the old ways and the old procedures of doing things. And the more closely they've been associated with politics for a long time, the more danger there is going to be of that. And therefore, and if you are a party member, even if you haven't been active in politics, people like Tim McGinley and whatnot are very good people, but there will be inevitably a majority party and a second runner-up party, and those will be Democrat or Republican in whatever order. And if there is no independent voice on some issues, there's no question but that party loyalty and party persuasiveness will influence the formation of a majority. You can't, certainly, there are a lot of very fine people running, and I would not take anything away from the slate. It certainly is an extremely varied slate, which I think is a good thing for the county, but it's nice to hear Bible Buck up there. But an independent will not have any party pressures, not have any pressures from those who have contributed to parties over the years. And therefore, in my mind, to have ideally a couple of independents on the council would speak to this new start, new system, not just traveling on the old course.
What was it that appealed to you from the start that you wanted to be a supporter of the home rule form of government to begin with?
Well, one aspect was the professional county manager. I mean, I felt a county of this size and varied population and whatnot needs a professional to run the day-to-day operations. The idea that elected, three elected commissioners, or two of them, are going to decide the day-to-day operations and tell the people in the various departments what to do is inevitably politically influenced and not efficient, in my opinion. Whereas a professional county manager who has had, first of all, some college training and hopefully even maybe an advanced degree in municipal management will be much more, can be much more effective than elected commissioners in running things. I liked that efficiency of the county manager. And the council, there was great debate about that and whether it really should be 11 people or should be 5 or all that sort of thing. I think the 11 choice was a good one, and I think that provides much more possibility of having an independent voice or two than a smaller panel would. So the structure appealed to me. The other major factor was the accountability and ethics code.
Okay. On that subject, have you been attending the transition committee's meetings as it tries to put in place some of these aspects? And do you feel it's at the point where it needs to be to make a smooth transition, or do you have concerns about where it is right now?
I don't have, I've been to some. I have not made it a point to try to go to all of the transition committee meetings. I went to one of the subcommittees of that group on the personnel and, of course, the advertising for the county manager's job and all. I think things are reasonable. I was impressed with some of the commentary by people and also by the way the meetings run. I thought they were run very well, Mr. Bobek. There is a lot that has still got to be ironed out, and some of that in terms of personnel policies really should await some consultation with the new county manager.
Is there a reason that you are not attending more of the meetings? Is that a conscious decision on your part that you don't want to be that closely associated with it, or is it more a matter of time, or what?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, partly time and whatnot. The evening is when one prepares one's classes. I didn't really want to get caught up, as I think some candidates have, in the sort of day-to-day blow-by-blow aspects of the transition. I think that could, in some ways, influence one, sour one, lead one to form some opinions about other people on the transition, some of whom will be on the elected council. So I did not feel that it was imperative, and in some ways, probably that it would not be a good thing to go to all the meetings and even some of the subcommittee meetings.
If elected, what kind of time would you devote to being a council member?
Well, I am a part-time history teacher at Misericordia. This semester I'm teaching only one class. Usually I've taught 2. This does not take, it meets 2 days of the week, and this does not take a great deal of time. I would see myself able to spend quite a bit of time. And with only 2, most of the time probably, only 2 meetings per month, regular meetings, there should be absolutely no problem with that. What I realize, and what perhaps some of the other people running don't, is having had a business manager at Wyoming Seminary and dealing and being on the finance committee of the trustees, there's going to be a lot of time that council members are going to spend reading over budgets, contracts, major contract proposals, all that sort of thing. I don't pretend to have either a overweening love or detailed accounting knowledge. I don't. But I certainly know about spreadsheets and about budgets and contracts, and would be prepared to spend the time that's going to have to be spent. And I think some people are not, don't realize that that's going to happen to them.
Do you feel it would be appropriate for a council member to have a daily presence in the courthouse, or do you think you would have another means by which you'd make yourself accessible to the public?
I think that it would be a very good idea for each member to, and this gets into some logistical problems about space and offices and all of that that's been batted around. I would think that 3 or 4 days a week, ideally, any council member should have a time, and whether that should be posted on the website or whatever, that they would be for an hour or so. I don't think you have to come in and spend all day, and a great deal of the work that you're going to be doing in terms of reading things can be done at home. I do worry about the space issue for 11 people to really get a private space to talk with voters and concerned citizens.
So just to clarify, say about 3 hours total a week?
3 or 4 hours maybe a week in the courthouse. So that doesn't mean that that's all one would be spending on county business. There's this whole issue of the very fine line that this council is going to have to walk between, on the one hand, being responsible for the appointment and the removal and therefore the evaluation of the county manager, and on the other hand, all of which really require some contact by county council members with some of members of the county administration. And of course, this is all spelled out very carefully, and I think well, that no council member is ever to give orders or direct requests, but it would be a listening process. And I think the county council should really set up some mechanisms for that and not leave it to the individual council member to arrange all of that. But I think the council members need to get familiar with the various departments, and the only way you can really do that is get out and visit. So that's something I would feel would be, on top of the 4 hours that you would spend in the office there. But the danger is that those who are used to the county commissioner system will find it very hard to divorce themselves from the fact that they are not executives and they no longer give directions or push or probe in one way or another for constituents in terms of jobs or anything else. Someone who might be a very good county commissioner could be a dreadful member of council because the function is different. And I think a lot of people have not really sorted that through.
What do you think is your strongest attribute that you would bring to this particular body at this time?
Well, I think that my background in education is a plus. Now, people have joked that there are too many educators running for council, and that there certainly will never be very many moments of silence in the council meetings, because if 3 or 4 of these educators or former educators get elected, that all we like to do is talk. But that, of course, isn't true. But I do think that my work in education, I have been a historian. I'm not particularly an economic historian, but I certainly have had to deal with that. Government, politics, I've taught a comparative government course. I think that background is helpful in a general way. Obviously, it doesn't educate me about Luzerne County and NEPA, but in a general way, in terms of politics, I've always been interested in that. I think having been an executive in fairly large nonprofits for 35 years, and 25 of those as a CEO, headmaster principal of two different schools, the constituencies that you have to deal with as an educator are in some ways similar to the forces and factors and constituencies that you deal with as a politician. I mean, you have the students, you have the parents, you have the trustees, you have major donors. All of that is part of school, as well as very much part of politics. I think my experience there, and also in terms of managing and evaluating people, which the council is going to have to do very much so with the county manager. I've had a lot of practice in that and various systems of doing it. I think that I work well with people and work well in committees, and this is a committee, a large one, and there will be give and take in all of that. I think that my independent position within the give and take of a committee meeting will be a plus.
If elected to the council, would you want to serve as its chair? And if not, what qualities would you be looking for in a chair for this council?
Yes, the chair is going to be a very important position. And then the clerk is also going to be an important position. I would certainly be willing to serve as chair if members of the council wanted that. I would think that logically the majority party in the council would choose one of their number. Now, that's fine, and as it should be in many respects. What I would hope is that they would choose someone who realizes the new aspect of this council, that it isn't the commissioners and doesn't do the same functions and doesn't go out and probe and snoop and poke around in administration. And I would be very wary in voting for a council chair who wasn't fully committed to this new system.
If elected and you're serving on this body, would you vote to approve the hiring of a relative to a county authority, board, or commission?
Well, of course, leaving aside that dreadful issue of who is a relative and how close and far you're going to go. Now, my feeling is that probably there should be some sort of prohibition with maybe some way to overcome that in certain circumstances. But then no, relatives shouldn't be on boards or authorities.
Do you have specific suggestions for where money can be saved or how revenues can be increased at this particular point without having seen a budget at this particular point, or have you?
Yes, no, I haven't seen the budget. I've purposely stayed away from that. I think that the council will, of course, have some members on it who have been through the process with the interim. But really, this is the last budget that the commissioners will draw up. I think a fresh eye to that in January by members of the new council is fine. Now, without having seen the budget that will be presented to the council for approval, with the authority in the council to make some adjustments in it, I would not go out on any specific limbs. Obviously, the reorganization of county government, reducing the number of offices, all of that, is going to produce savings, and that's going to be figured in whatever way possible. Some of the candidates for council have said that no taxes will be raised. I have to say that I'm certainly not in favor of taxing people a lot, but for a county official responsible in the overall sense, the council overall sense, for approving the budget drawn up by the county manager, to say that never under any circumstance if you raise a property tax or any other tax. I think it's short-sighted, and I think there are some investigations of other sorts of taxes, too, that could be implemented in Luzerne County. The other issue is, of course, the county employees, laying off of county employees. And there's some people running for council who have said jobs, particularly union jobs, will be protected. We're not going to lay off people. I certainly would not favor some sort of slash and burn operation to reduce the county employees way down in all departments in order to cover that budget shortfall. I think all too often people these days, given the budget crises on all levels of government, including the federal and the international, there is too much of a tendency to say, can't possibly raise any taxes on one hand, and then the other side saying, well, we can't lay anybody off because then there'll be further drain on the dole. I think that cost-saving measures, revenue-increasing measures, all of these have to be considered, and have to be considered with at least a half-open mind. And I think some people are going to find it difficult to do that. The other cost-saving measure or revenue-producing aspect is the whole business of luring more firms, companies, who will have more than 3 or 4 employees, to Luzerne County. And that is a very delicate business, which has been in various hands, Chamber of Business and Industry and whatnot. I think no member of the council can fail to think about that and to try to work out ways in which Luzerne County can be made or appear to be attractive for businesses. And not just fracking.
Tell us more about do you have particular suggestions along those lines?
No, not in any meaningful or developed fashion. I think there is the whole business of not necessarily going out and targeting particular companies, but making Luzerne County and Northeast Pennsylvania attractive to visit. And the more people who come to this area, the more likelihood there is that some of them could say, well, this might not be a bad place. And that, of course, is in the hands of your tourism people and all. But the council's got to think about that. Having Hazleton, Wilkes-Barre host conferences of various sorts, I think is a very good way to highlight the area. And it's good.
In your professional background, do you have experience in shepherding along this kind of change in a system?
Well, I've worked in really 4 or 5 different schools, and every time you go to a different school, there's a different setup. And 2 of those schools were in different countries from the U.S., so there was even more change or difference. So I think I have adjustment abilities in terms of feeling one's way in a new environment and not just behaving the same old way that you did in a previous one. And I think that I have a certain amount of creativity and imagination, not a vast amount, but I would like to be able to use that in helping this process.
What do you feel is the county's responsibility in funding outside organizations such as public libraries?
Well, I think ideally the county should contribute to public libraries and certain other outside functions, because use of libraries and promotion of literacy is a very important thing for the area in all sorts of ways. Efficiency of the workforce eventually, education, better education. Obviously, though, in certain economic times, one may have to cut back or cut off those because it's all balancing.
If elected, will you bring a particular issue to the council for consideration, something about which you're particularly passionate, whether it be a natural gas issue, a taxation issue, or don't you feel it's placed to bring the issues to the manager as much as wait to hear from the manager?
Well, I think what the council is going to find it difficult to do is to wait for the manager. Some members of the council are going to find that difficult. I don't have, other than this very generalized idea that we've got to attract more favorable attention to Luzerne County and Northeast Pennsylvania. One of the things actually that I do feel fairly strongly about is that I hope that the council can help facilitate cooperation between and among the boroughs, townships, the municipal authorities in Luzerne County. I mean, we all know that in some ways there are too many, although this gives the local people a voice and who is running their local police and whatnot. All too often, it results in an overload of personnel. I do not feel that it is certainly not the role of the council to force amalgamation of these entities, but to make them cooperate with each other and share and exchange services. You can keep the same kind of local representation in all matters for a little borough of 735 people, but reduce costs for them and have greater efficiency by pooling resources, whether that's snow plows or whether that's police or whatever. And I think the council just has to do everything it can to encourage that.
Now, there's always a certain level of media interest in county operations that's going to amplify, I'm sure, in 2012. Do you have suggestions, or what way do you feel is appropriate for this council to communicate with not just the Times Leader, but all the news outlets? Should there be a person appropriate, a spokesperson for council, or should each member be able to go to the media?
Well, that is an interesting question, which frankly I had not thought about and haven't thought about in any great detail. My feeling is that with 11 people, it is going to be very difficult to keep private, secret things secret about meetings, even closed meetings. Appointing a spokesperson, whether this would be a member of council, who would be the one to present formal things to the press and to interested parties that the council has come up with. That might be a good idea. I don't think you want to have another paid press officer in the clerk's office, for instance, because that's just another layer of paid personnel. I think appointing a spokesperson who is on the council would be appropriate, realizing that you are going to inevitably, with 11 people, have leakage and personal opinions come out. And this council also has to strive for transparency, because that has been a significant issue. So one would have to be very careful, and in very rare instances, try to muzzle all members of the council. The spokesperson can put out the official, what the vote was, and these are the issues and whatnot, and this is why. But to muzzle the other council members and say that they can't say anything isn't going to work and would be counterproductive and lay it open to lack of transparency. The party rivalries will probably take care of that, too.
What are you doing this month to campaign, and are you at a disadvantage by not having participated in the primary and getting your name out there?
Well, obviously I am at a disadvantage in that. I've got some very colorful signs, and we're beginning to get those up around about. I participated in these forums. I've passed out flyers, and actually I didn't bring any of those with me today. I'll put on a different suit. The name recognition issue is obviously very important, and this gives great advantage to people who were in the primary and people who had other public exposure through the years. Now, right here in the heart of the valley, Wyoming Seminary and the president of Wyoming Seminary are known to a certain degree by many people. But I'll bet there are a lot of people on the street in Public Square right now who couldn't tell you what Wyoming Seminary was, where it was, or who the head was. And I'm very well aware of that. So I have to get the name out in positive ways. The forums, as we said before, are frustrating in terms of the amount of time that you get. But we've got 2 more of those coming up. Downtown Residents Association and the League of Women Voters. I have not given the usual sort of cocktail party warming up people to donate some money to you. I have not done that. Rick Williams, a fellow independent, has done that. I went to his party the other night. It was very nice. I may, during this month, have some smaller gatherings in people's houses and have those be in different parts of the county. And what I have to work really hard at is getting some consciousness of who I am in Hazleton and the southern part of the county, and more distant parts up here.
What do you expect to spend in the campaign?
Well, my wife has given me some orders about that, suggestions about that. This will not be a big money campaign. To do that, you have to spend a lot of time cultivating donors that you should be spending getting the word out to a broader number of people. And I'm not, I did enough fundraising as president of seminary to relish a lot more of that. I have set aside $3,000 or $4,000 of my own money to spend. I haven't spent all that yet. And we have raised to date for my campaign about $1,000 in small donations. There were some estimates in my political committee, which is just a small group, that it was going to take, that it really would take $10,000 to mount a decent campaign. I'm not anxious to try to get that. The major expense, of course, is television time. And the candidates with the most money will be able to do that in the final week before the election. And I'm not at all certain that I'm going to have the money to do that.
You mentioned Rick Williams' name twice in conversation. Have you joined with other council candidates to form a coalition of sorts? Is that something?
No, no. I know some of the other council candidates. Tim McKinley is a neighbor over in Kingston there. And there's one former son parent also in that group. No, I think independent means independent. And we have run independent campaigns, too. I mean, we've talked on the phone, we've messaged a few worthwhile things, lists and whatnot to each other. But we agreed at the beginning that we share general aspects of thought about the council and its functions, and about what is good for Luzerne County in a generalized way, but that we don't conference about each issue. And I think we're together on most of the big issues, but that is not part of any set plan that we be together. And we have not, certainly I haven't, and I don't, you would have to ask Rick, I have not talked to other council members who are members of other parties about any kind of working group coalition, because I think that would be very, first of all, it's premature. Secondly, I think what ideally the independent voice is that on any particular issue, you reserve your independence and listen to the arguments and examine the issues, and then you vote. As soon as you start linking up with people, that gets you into your party and to party politics and pressures.
Any questions from the group at this point? My last question, are you satisfied with this endorsement interview? Have you had an opportunity to tell us what you wanted to? Have you been asked the appropriate questions?
I think so, yes. And I hope I haven't gone on too long, like many educators, in my answers. The major issue is going to be working out over a period of, it'll take months, it'll take a couple of years for the council to work out how you're going to both evaluate county government, and the county manager in particular, her or his responsibilities, are they carrying it out, and not interfering and going around behind the county manager to talk to people in lower offices about how things are going, and getting caught up in all sorts of personnel issues. Now, those will come up to the council because inevitably some citizens will bring them up. But it is going to take quite a while to work out and to have everybody on the council get used to and understand what they can do and what they can't do in terms of contact with county employees. And I think a lot of people haven't really thought about that very much.
Anything that we didn't ask you about that you want to mention? Anything that you want to emphasize in particular?
No, there's all this controversy about the names of the candidates for the county manager. And I think everybody's on board that it's a national search, and it is a national search, and that's what we should have. The whole question of whether the candidate's name should be published, and for transparency's sake, and also to show the public that, well, there are a lot of good people who've applied with a lot of different experiences, and that would be good in some ways. I think that putting out the names of anything other than 3 or 4 finalists would be a great mistake for 2 reasons. One, it will discourage later applicants because a lot of people are not going to want just the fact that they've submitted their resume and applied to be known, whether it's because of their current employer or other issues. Finalists, and there really should be only 3 or 4, maybe only 3. They, I think, have to be put out to the public, partly because they are going to come here to the Valley and be interviewed here and interview and look at various elements of the county administration and be quizzed by the council as part of the final decision-making process as to which is going to be the county manager. And so to try to keep secret who they are is totally false. And their resume and their application and everything they've said, those should be made public for 3 or at the most 4.
We very much want to thank you for having a conversation with us today.